Welcome to Main Street Podcast, an opportunity to talk to Idaho's elected leaders about the issues that matter to you. Hello, we are here with Senator Treg Bernt and Representative Josh Wheeler of the Main Street Caucus. You know, gentlemen, I just watched for the first time the movie Twins. And so Arnold Schwarzenegger and Danny DeVito. And
Who's who?
Neither of you look like it.
Danny DeVito, Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Like him. But in essence, we have a senator from the west side of the state, serving out of Meridian.
Yeah.
And we have a legislator on the House side from eastern Idaho, right?
Yeah.
So on appearance, you guys are pretty different. But just like in the movie, I think as we dig in a little bit more, we'll find there's a lot of commonalities here. So, Senator, why don't we start with you and give you a shot to explain, first off, who are you? What are you doing here?
That's a great question. Well, I'm actually from Pocatello. I'm an East Idahoan. I moved over to the Treg Valley in 2003, got heavily involved with community, got elected to the Meridian City Council. From there, I got reelected and got elected to the Senate. I'm a small business owner. I have 3 kiddos. We just dropped 2 of them off to at Boise State this past weekend, and we're empty nesters. And I got to tell you, that's a weird feeling. But public service has always ran deep in our family, and so it's been a true honor to be able to serve in the Senate.
Yeah, and not to steal any of your thunder, but just recap. Former city councilman,
right?
Small business owner,
Right.
Family.
A lot of commonality.
Well, that's just, all right. All right, Josh. Now we really led you in here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about you?
Well, I'm an Idaho boy, born and raised here in eastern Idaho, graduated from Hillcrest High School back in '95, go Knights, and married my high school sweetheart. We went away to go to school and came back as quick as we could, My wife did a residency program in Pocatello, the Portneuf Family Medicine Program, and then I came back to work with my family business. So I'm a third-generation small business owner, which is its own unique set of challenges and story. And we raised 6 beautiful kiddos here in eastern Idaho. And, I got involved in local politics, strangely enough, after we lost a 10-year-old son to cancer. And we had, and people who live here or people who come here, they see it, they sense it. There is such a community in eastern Idaho, such a group of good people that will rally around you in your dark times. And I really felt like I had to find a way to give back after that. And I had a friend who pointed out to me that there was an open seat on Ammon City Council and that I ought to get involved in that way. And that felt like the right thing. Of course, then it wasn't an open seat. There were two other candidates that chose to run for it, but we won that election. And then I really just felt a similar calling, frankly, when this election came up. And I felt like I needed to be an option to represent District 35 here in eastern Idaho. And so we put ourselves out there and had a very hard-fought, interesting campaign and won, and here we are. And so I honestly, it's been an incredible way for me to give back. You learn so much more about your community, about your state that you would never learn any other way. So,
yeah, and both freshmen in the legislature.
Right.
But we're here on a platform of the Main Street Caucus. And this was your guys' brainchild, right?
I'm a bad politician when it comes to taking credit for everything, right? I give a lot of credit to a lot of people who've brought this together. And I mean, I bet maybe I'll just tell my sort of version, my perspective of how we got to this point. One of the things that formed very early on in my first legislative session and a little before that is something called the East Idaho Coalition. And that's just a group of more than a dozen of our eastern Idaho legislators who just wanted to find a good space to come together, talk like adults in the room about policy, wonky stuff sometimes, right? And just be able to bounce ideas off each other and know that that was a trusted space, that we'd be able to ask hard questions and frankly have better legislation come out of it. And that was just a huge boon to me as a freshman legislator to know that I had these experienced legislators, both senators and representatives, that were mentoring me. And then as I met Treg and we kind of hit things off, and I think without actually actively recognizing how many commonalities we had, a lot of our conversation was, how do we take that statewide? How do we give that same kind of opportunity to all of as many legislators as we can throughout the state? And so that's kind of where we started to build the model off of the Eastern Idaho Coalition. Yeah,
I would agree a lot with what Representative Wheeler said. At the end of the day, for their strength in numbers. And the vast majority of Idahoans expect Idaho solutions. And right now, you see a lot of vitriol, you see a lot of divisiveness in our party, and we wanted to put together a group of reasonable conservative Republicans that care a lot about Idaho and want to serve and want to get it right.
Yeah, it seems simple. But to those who have just tuned in, that we need to take this back a little bit to like Schoolhouse Rock, government 101. Let's start with, this is a Main Street caucus. Some people, their understanding of caucus is, the Iowa caucus exists and we elect presidents or from parties. Let's go back. First off, why don't we start with what is a caucus? And then let's get into, how this actually functions in Boise. Senator, do you want to start?
Sure. So a caucus is a group of like-minded individuals, in this case legislators, that get together and we discuss policy. In this case, we discuss lawmaking, and we're together as one. That doesn't mean that we always disagree. I believe that disagreement leads to big ideas, and I think at the end of the day, that's the most important thing. But a caucus, this caucus is, we're not trying to take anything away from a Republican caucus that currently exists. This is just a group of, again, like-minded individuals who care a lot and want to see reasonable policies supported and put forward in the Idaho State Legislature.
Can you give us an example of some other caucuses that might be existing over in the legislature right now? You mentioned the Republican caucus as a whole. We got Main Street caucus. Where else do like-minded people group up over there?
I'm part of another caucus. I'm part of the Sportsman's Caucus.
Okay.
So we discuss a lot of issues related to hunting and out the outdoors and conservation, et cetera. And so we meet once a month and we discuss those policy issues as well. So very similar in how we operate.
Yeah. And so with these caucuses, you talk about like-minded. Main Street, it evokes this feeling of I'm walking down Main Street, chamber, business, and both of you being small business owners yourselves. Is that kind of one of the focuses that you're hoping this caucus would achieve, is economic growth?
100%. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that, we believe in strongly is that the least regulated amount of business that you can have is the more prosperous business. The more prosperous business community you have in the state, the better off the state is, then the better off the citizens are. And, we believe in responsible growth. One of the things that I recently heard Governor Little comment is that change is inevitable, but adapting to and adjusting to that change is a choice, right? And we believe that we've got to make those choices. And that means having some of these hard conversations that Senator Bernt referred to. It means some disagreement without being disagreeable, without bullying one another into trying to look at it one way or the other, right? So those are a couple of the big ones. And then some of those just, frankly, old Republican principles. We believe in the rule of law. We believe in supporting our first responders, law enforcement. We believe in finding the smart solutions for healthcare throughout the state. Just those are some of the principles that we really stand for. And again, I think most importantly to me is just having a trusted space where legislators can work with one another and know that in the very next moment, they're not going to be thrown under the bus on whatever the social media site of the day is. I think it's X these days, right? I can't remember the name.
But that doesn't mean we play patty cake and smile at each other and everything's great. We disagree. I don't agree with my wife 100% of the time, let alone fellow legislators.
Sure, right.
And so I think that's a reasonable approach. So
now you talked a little bit about strength in numbers. As you guys group up in this caucus, what are some of the goals you're hoping to accomplish in the upcoming session? And maybe, let's look back. What are you proud of that the caucus was able to do this last session? And let's look forward of what are you hoping the caucus can do in the coming session?
Number one, I think first and foremost, one of the first things that came out of the gate was, and I think this has been discussed in past podcasts, is launch. That was a great initiative that obviously provides scholarships for in-demand careers for students that are coming out of high school, graduating, that maybe aren't fully interested in a 4-year degree, but have something to give and something to give to community, and they want to go to a community college, et cetera, to study and to get a certificate of such. And I think that those jobs are very much needed. Career technical education as well is another great example.
Yeah, I mean, I'll piggyback right off of Senator Bernt said one of my favorite words was career technical education.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, one of the things that you saw our Main Street Idaho caucus members help get put together is the Career Ready Students Program, right? Which is kind of the part of the pipeline before launch where we get students pointed at these career technical opportunities while they're still in middle school and high school, right? I think launch is a great example. I mean, the other one I think you'll find that probably all of our Main Street Idaho caucus members are proud of is the property tax relief bill. And you know, that's one that you can see the caucus worked with the whole Republican caucus to get that done. And, you know, give credit where credit was due. Like everybody worked hard to make that one happen. And then, you know, you'll see some that we had members that are on different sides of votes, but they had some real serious discussions before they got to that point. And in the end of the day, a lot of what our members recognize is we represent our constituents. And a constituent in District 35 a lot of times has some different ways they want to see things done than a constituent in, I mean, District 21 or maybe even in, you know, District 1. I mean, we have to keep that in mind, and that's one of the things that is really important to us as members of the Main Street Idaho Caucus.
Sure. The Big Ten Republican approach, very much needed in this state, and it's okay to be different. It's okay to have different perspectives, but at the end of the day, we're all conservative Republicans. Again, a Kootenai County Republican maybe is a little bit different than a Bannock County Republican, but at the end of the day, we're all playing for the same team, and I think that's what's most important.
Yeah, let's elaborate on that because, you know, we've heard the idea that, you know, the worst thing you can do is speak ill of another conservative, right? That's come out.
Reagan rule.
That's the Reagan rule. But in Idaho, that's definitely not the case, right? And you gentlemen have had targets on your back from the left for some of your votes as being far too conservative, but also from the right. At times, they will, you know, paint you with the Republican in name alone. You know, how do you find this median where you're able to say, I am a conservative Republican, but you got people to the right of you that say no, and people left of you that saying, well, that's not where you should be either?
No, that's a great question. I just recently read a book. It's Love Your Enemies by Arthur C. Brooks, and if you guys haven't read it, I would highly recommend it. It's it provides great perspective on what we're coming from as a caucus. But inside the book, there's a quote, and it says, "When elephants fight, it's the grass that suffers." And so, at the end of the day, I approach it as I listen to my constituents, and we pass legislation, and we debate regarding what is coming from our different districts and from our constituents. And ultimately, it's our constituents that we listen to and who are most important. But at the end of the day, if we don't do that, it's the grass that suffers, right? It's the constituents who suffer the most. And they're the ones that need, you know, reasonable policy and lawmaking more than anyone.
Yeah. And the average constituent out there, maybe not even the average voter, just the average constituent, they might not know your name. They might not know what a legislator does, let alone a caucus.
Wheeler's pretty popular guy.
He's a very popular, especially over here. Yeah.
I mean,
they know him.
He walks down the street, everyone waves.
It's true. He signs autograph regularly, which
Unless you need somebody for pickup basket.
it's not that good. How do you take an approach to informing your constituents of some of these very complicated issues? We talk about launch, talk about some of the water issues. Representative, why don't you come in and say and help us see how do you go about helping the people in your district understand some of these difficult things going on in Boise?
Yeah, you know, I'm glad you're asking that, Brennan, because the truth is that is one of our goals as the Main Street Idaho Caucus. You know, one of the things we've heard from most of our members is help us tell the story, tell the good story, because it's so easy to get buried in the noise, you know. And I will tell you, honestly, for me, Brennan, so freshman legislator, this is my first time over there. Honestly, the first time,
do you feel like a freshman?
Depends on the day. You know, that's why I grew the beard out, so I'd feel less like a crash, all right? But the honest truth is, like, for me, I haven't been that far away from my family, from my wife and kids in a long time, right? And so to be that far apart every day and then to call home and try to explain to my wife, to my sweetheart of 25 years, hey, here's what's going on. Here was the good things. And it actually took me a while, honestly. It took me probably about 4 weeks into the session to realize, like, I better tell her the good stories.
Yeah,
because she's over here like just marinating in some of that nastiness. And I mean, it's so easy to find, you know, the junk. It's so easy to pick up the trash, especially if you get out there on the social media or what have you, right? But then to be able to tell her the good stories, you know, the property tax relief that was coming, the stuff that we did for education, the stuff that we're doing for infrastructure, right? The way that we're empowering local government to make decisions that are going to be best for whether it's the people in Montpelier, Idaho, or whether it's the people over in Meridian. I mean, those are different solutions, right? And so telling that story to her, to me, that's what I want Main Street to do to as many of our constituents as they can, right?
Yeah.
Is tell that story of all the legislators who have chosen to be involved in Main Street, because there are so many of them. And I know you've interviewed some of them already. Like some of the work they're doing is fantastic, whether it's, finding Medicaid cost relief or program improvements, whether it's school facility funding. I mean, that's stuff that my sweetheart cares about. And so to me, that means I know many of my constituents are going to care about it too.
Sure. And like most things in life, it seems like the negative is just easier to find and it's easier to explain. And you two have seen it. You've had mailers. The mailers could come out campaign season. It's so much easier to explain how awful of a job you've done in a couple sentences versus explain some of the good stuff you've done, right? So, Senator, if I'm sitting in Meridian and I'm thinking, where can I find what actually my senator in Boise is doing? Where might I look to get some of the stuff that you're actually up to?
Right. So, I mean, I as a legislator, it's really tough to hide. And not saying that I would ever want to, but I have social media platforms from Twitter to Facebook to Instagram, and we have a great team that we all do I believe a good job messaging what's going on during session and out of session, who we're talking to, the meetings that we're having at Main Street with Main Street businesses, with Main Street people at our individual cities, and for example, in my district this next week, they're having a Medicaid town hall talking about Medicaid and what that looks like, managed care, et cetera. And so you can find those messages on my social media platform. I think that same thing with Josh and other Main Streeters as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And then as much as we can, like if you go to the Main Street Idaho website, we'll amplify those messages as much as we can. One of the things we've done is we've made connections with a lot of the local papers. And so you're seeing op-eds come out from either from individual Main Street Idaho caucus members or from as much of the caucus as can. And like one that I'll give you an example of that most recently came out, Chanel Dixon, an incredible representative from over in the Twin Falls area.
Right.
She is like doing her homework and working hard to better understand the fentanyl issue, right? And how mandatory minimums could better serve all the citizens of Idaho, help our kids be safer. And I'm here to tell you, that's some work. Like she's doing some homework. Like I don't think people realize it. We want people to realize that. We want to tell that story and say, so when that shows up in committee, when it gets to the floor, like people understand, hey, look, here's the work that Main Street legislators have been doing to make that happen.
Right. It's just important to stay above the fray. That's what people want. They're sick of the divisiveness. They're sick of the fighting. They're sick of the name calling. Our constituents want legislators to get together to come up with solutions for Idaho. It's that simple. It's not rocket science. It's the legislators. Sometimes we complicate it.
Yeah.
And we're here to simplify it and to get stuff done. And that's what we aim to do.
Yeah, they say, Christmas dinner, Thanksgiving, don't talk religion or politics. I think it's because we're doing it wrong, right?
I agree.
So, and I know you two you've mentioned already on this podcast of talking like adults in the room, of coming together and disagreeing better. Let's have a little conversation about what's the state of civility of Idaho politics, where are we struggling, and what are some action points that your listeners here on the podcast can do, and then maybe what some other legislators could do to your point, Senator, rise above the fray and disagree better.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that comes to mind, one thing that we need to realize is that when you disagree, that doesn't mean, I think big ideas come from disagreement. I expect disagreement. I think that competitiveness comes from disagreement. We're always better with disagreement. That's fine. We're not asking for perfection. We're just asking for us to, be more respectful. Civility is an interesting word. I think it's important, but I think that we need to be respectful, and we need to really not draw a hard line in the sand and say, either you're 100% with us or we're going to throw you out in the water. That's not what constituents want ultimately. It's okay to navigate those gray areas. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't stand up for our core values. That's not what we're saying at all. We need to stand up for who we are and what we represent. But we need to be able to be open-minded in those discussions as well, because there might be something there that we're missing.
What I'll say, Brennan, is just one. And here's what I mean by that. Again, I've had Thanksgiving dinners and Christmas dinners. I got 4 beautiful daughters. I got 2 wonderful sons. I got a raft of different opinions when I get those people all together.
True.
And what I will say is just one more question. Just ask one more question to that person when they bring that view that is frankly insane, that seems crazy to you, right? You can ask just one more question. Well, why do you feel that way? Well, where did you hear that? And well, what do you think that means, that we need to do A, B, C, whether it's policy or how we treat each other, right? I mean, being willing to ask a question rather than just a pass judgment, I think is one of the ways that we can, let's just call it safe Thanksgiving dinner, and all I'll say is I've tried to live that way in my family. I've tried to respect my kids, whatever age they were, and give them opportunity to explain to me why that's the way they feel, even when I disagree with them, right? I think that we can disagree and not demonize. And that's what's happened is, especially on the national scene, demonization has become the way to operate. And Idaho doesn't need that. That's not how Idaho built the incredible state that we built.
Are we able to give standing ovations?
That's it, right? A podcast. That was an aim. That was an aim.
I really want to drop the mic.
I really want to give this guy a hug right now. That's exactly what we're talking about.
He's a good one, right? I mean, that's why nobody loves him.
I'm screaming. Oh, yeah, you could sense that passion, but
absolutely.
Well done. That's exactly how we feel.
Right. And, we look at our documents, our founding documents, to your point, Senator, disagreement brought us the Constitution, but so did compromise. And it required none of our founders to actually get rid of their core beliefs. So I love this idea that you just taught us. We can ask more questions. We can disagree better and still stand our ground. This is fantastic.
Did Jefferson and Adams get along in the second act of their lives? I mean, they were together. They were considered the North and South Pole,
right,
of the Declaration of Independence. They became mortal enemies, all right, when they were running against each other and they got political. And then they found a way to become friends again. And
let me add to that, Senator, is that Benjamin Rush helped bring them together as friends. There's a founding father we don't talk about that much, and that's okay because he didn't do that much. But he did help those 2 old war horses come together.
Yeah. I think it's possible. Yeah. So, the moral of the story of this is more Adams and Jeffersons, less Hamiltons and Burrs, right?
Yes.
We don't need to be shooting each other over in Boise. We can disagree. We can come together. Now, gentlemen, let's talk about some things we're excited about. When you look at the next session coming up, what gets you excited? What gets you ready to make that trip back over to Boise to spend those long days in the Capitol? What are you looking forward to, Senator?
One thing that I'm working on, I have a friend who is and myself, we're going to do some legislation regarding drunk driving, mandatory minimums, maybe create some more tax policy regarding, maybe giving breaks to Idaho citizens during certain times of the year. Those are some things, without getting into some details, but those are some things that I'm going to work on that I'm really excited about this next upcoming
That's
session.
A great teaser. Now, remind us what committees you've been sitting on.
So I'm the vice chair of state affairs, and I also sit on local government and taxation.
Fantastic. And both in the Senate.
Yeah, both of us.
Representative, what are you looking forward to?
So I'm on the House side. I'm on health and welfare, then energy, environment, and technology, and commerce and HR. And actually, what I'm working on, one that's commerce and HR related is, and it's also related to career technical education again, but I want to make sure that we can do some skills-based hiring and not just have degree-required hiring, right? Because a lot of times, even in our state employment, right, we have jobs and job descriptions and it says, 4-year degree or minimum required, and you might have a guy that's got 20 years experience in the industry that didn't get that particular degree or didn't get a degree, and he is absolutely the right person to take the state to the next level, and we're leaving him out in the cold, right? Or we're going to get these kids that will go through the Idaho Launch Program, and they will come out with incredible skills, certifications, and experience, and they might be the right solution. So that's one that I'm working on. We mentioned a couple others already. I think that I'm excited about to support other members. The fentanyl thing.
Sure.
There is a Medicaid conversation going on with pretty much all of our Main Street Idaho members that I think is really valuable. That is a complicated issue, But I think we're going to have some solutions. We're going to see some solutions. And those are a few. There's more, but
I'm sure.
I know you're limited on time.
We are limited on time. And we got to know, what are you eating? What restaurant do you recommend? What are you reading? What book do you recommend? And then what are you watching? What movie can you recommend? Senator?
Great question. So, since Top Gun, I think that the latest movie that I watched, Sound of Freedom, great movie. Every Republican in the entire nation has seen that movie. Awesome. Highly recommend it. Reading a book right now called The Courage to be Disliked. Great philosophical approach to interpersonal relationships. Pretty fascinating. And anyone that knows me, I'm a Meridian guy. And without a shadow of a doubt, the best place to eat in downtown Meridian on Main Street Meridian, Cahoots.
Cahoots.
You got to love Cahoots.
And this isn't endorsed. They're not paying you for this. This is a free endorsement by you.
If you are Meridianite, you know exactly where you'll find me at noon on a Tuesday.
That's what a good time. I love it. Great recommendation.
Thank you.
That's amazing.
Josh?
Let's see. Well, I'll start with the book. The one I would recommend, frankly, because I feel like it changed my life just a few years ago, and it's nice to go back and revisit it, but it's The Happiness Advantage. It's just an incredible kind of deep dive into positive psychology and, the body keeps score and why that's important. People are funny because you think of my district, you think of District 35, and you're thinking agriculture and small towns. You don't know the restaurants unless you get out.
He's gonna offend somebody.
Unless you get out there. I don't. He should be able to. I'll just tell you the one that comes to my mind first, because it's one that my family will literally say, well, we should drive up there and get a burger, right? Because it's like the best burger you'll ever have, and that's the American Brakeman in Victor.
Oh, fantastic!
It's like right as you come into Victor, it is the most incredible burger you'll ever have. Make sure you check their hours, because that's the one thing that's a little wonky about them. It's like tax policy. You're not quite sure when it's going to be an incredible burger, though. So, and the movie, well, Treg stole the obvious one, but honestly,
Barbie.
If you got if you got kids,
you're not wearing pink.
You go take them to see the new Spider-Man cartoon, baby, across the Spider-Verse.
Okay,
awesome.
Yeah. Well,
that's the fun one.
Well, I appreciate you indulging me on that. I've now got a couple new places to eat and a couple new movies to watch.
So meet when you come to Meridian.
Hey, appreciate it. That's everybody listening. Do you hear that?
Absolutely.
Treg will pay for all of our food down there. All right, gentlemen, we've covered a lot today. We talked about why we put together Main Street Caucus, the goals of it. We talked about how we may be able to disagree better. We looked at our founding fathers might be an example of how we in Boise can come together and solve more problems. As we depart, I think of the young families you have relative, right? And as you're in this position of influence, what are you hoping they're watching and learning from you? Is it okay if we start with you, Senator?
Yeah. So Idaho has given me a ton. I've been super blessed in my life to enjoy all things Idaho. And if there's one thing that I truly want for my kiddos is to have the same type of Idaho that I grew up in.
Yeah.
And so huge blessing, it choked up a little bit, but huge blessing in my life to be able to walk down those halls at the Capitol and to really do great things for Idaho. Hopefully my kiddos have an opportunity to enjoy the things that I've been blessed with as well.
And that's wonderful. Josh?
I think mine's pretty similar because, what I want, and the reason I'm so glad that the Main Street Caucus exists and we're going to tell this positive story is I want my kids to hear the good stories of Idaho, right? It's real easy to find the news story that something wacky happened, right? No. I want my kids, I got two daughters that are going to end up in the healthcare industry. I got one that's going to be an incredible educator. I got one that I don't know what she'll do with her life, honestly, but she'll be the greatest politician or business owner of all of us, And my son's still little, he's 10 years old, but I just want them to understand and see and be grateful for the Idaho that gave them the life that they have, that gave them the life that I have. And to be reminded, like I said, the reason I got involved in this is the community that lifted me up. And I want them to always remember that and see that over and over again in the good stories.
Well, gentlemen, we're grateful. We're grateful that you cut aside the time for us. We're not in favor of carve-outs, but you carved out some time for us, which we appreciate, Senator, coming over. Representative, you came across the street, but we still appreciate it just as much.
Thanks.
This has been a wonderful time. It's been optimistic and positive, and we'll hope to have you back soon, all right?
For sure.
Okay, we're here with Senator Treg Bernt, Representative Josh Wheeler, and we'll see you next time.